HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Horror on the Links, The Complete Tales of Jules de Grandin, Volume 1, by Seabury Quinn. Read by Paul Woodson. The Complete Tales of Jules de Grandin is dedicated to the memory of Robert E. Weinberg, who passed away in fall of 2016. Weinberg, who edited the 6-volume paperback series of de Grandin stories in the 1970s, also supplied many original issues of Weird Tales magazine from his personal collection, so that Seabury Quinn's work could be carefully scanned and transcribed digitally. Without his knowledge of the material and his editorial guidance, as well as his passion for Quinn's work over a long period of time, when admirers of the Jules de Grandin stories were often difficult to come by, this series would not have been possible, and we owe him our deepest gratitude and respect. Introduction by George A. Vanderburg and Robert E. Weinberg. Weird Tales, the self-described unique magazine, and one of the most influential Golden Age pulp magazines in the first half of the 20th century, was home to a number of now well-recognized names, including Robert Bloch, August Derleth, Robert E. Howard, H. P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, and Manly Wade Wellman. But among such stiff competition was another writer, more popular at the time than all of the aforementioned authors, and paid at a higher rate because of it. Over the course of 92 stories and a serialized novel, his most endearing character captivated pulp magazine readers for nearly 3 decades, during which time he received more front-cover illustrations accompanying his stories than any of his fellow contributors. The writer's name was Seabury Quinn, and his character was the French occult detective Jules de Grandin. Perhaps you've never heard of de Grandin, his indefatigable assistant, Dr. Trowbridge, or the fictional town of Harrisonville, New Jersey. Perhaps you've never even heard of Seabury Quinn, or maybe only in passing, as a historical footnote in one of the many essays and reprinted collections of Quinn's now more revered contemporaries. Certainly de Grandin was not the first occult detective. Algernon Blackwood's John Silence, Hodgson's Thomas Carnacki, and Sax Rohmer's Maurice Claw preceded him. Nor was he the last, as Wellman's John Thunstone, Marjorie Lawrence's Miles Pennoyer, and Joseph Payne Brennan's Lucius Leffing all either overlapped with the end of de Grandin's run or followed him. And without doubt de Grandin shares more than a passing resemblance to both Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, especially with his Dr. Watson-like sidekick, and Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. Indeed, even if you were to seek out a de Grandin story, your options over the years would have been limited. Unlike Lovecraft, Smith, Wellman, Bloch, and other Weird Tales contributors, the publication history of the Jules de Grandin tales is spotty at best. In 1966, Arkham House printed roughly 2,000 copies of The Phantom Fighter, a selection of 10 early works. In the late 1970s, Popular Library published 6 paperback volumes of approximately 35 assorted tales, but they are now long out of print. In 2001, the specialty press, the Battered Silicon Dispatch Box, released an oversized 3-volume hardcover set of every de Grandin story, the first time all the stories had been collected, and while still in production, the set is unavailable to the general trade. So, given how obscure Quinn and his character might seem today, it's justifiably hard to understand how popular these stories originally were, or how frequently new ones were written. But let the numbers tell the tale. From October 1925, when the very first de Grandin story was released, to December 1933, a roughly 8-year span, de Grandin's stories appeared in an incredible 62 of the 96 issues that Weird Tales published, totaling well over 750,000 words. Letter after letter to the magazine's editor demanded further adventures from the supernatural detective. If Quinn loomed large in the mind of pulp readers during the magazine's heyday, then why has his name fallen on deaf ears since? Aside from the relative unavailability of his work, the truth is that Quinn has been successfully marginalized over the years by many critics, who have often dismissed him as simply a hack writer. The de Grandin stories are routinely criticized as being of little worth, and dismissed as unimportant to the development of weird fiction. A common argument, propped up by suspiciously circular reasoning, concludes that Quinn was not the most popular writer for weird tales, just the most prolific. These critics seem troubled that the same audience who read and appreciated the work of Lovecraft, Smith, and Howard could also enjoy the exploits of the French Ghostbuster. And while it would be far from the truth to suggest that the literary merits of the de Grandin stories exceed those of some of his contemporaries' tales, Quinn was a much more skillful writer, and the adventures of his occult detective more enjoyable to read than most critics are willing to acknowledge. In the second half of the 20th century, as the literary value of some pulp fiction writers began to be reconsidered, Quinn proved to be the perfect whipping boy for early advocates attempting to destigmatize weird fiction. He was the hack author who churned out formulaic prose for a quick paycheck. Anticipating charges that a literary reassessment of Lovecraft would require reevaluating the entire genre along with him, an arbitrary line was quickly drawn in the sand, and as the standard-bearer of pulp fiction's popularity, the creator of Jules de Grandin found himself on the wrong side of that line. First and foremost, it must be understood that Quinn wrote to make money, and he was far from the archetypal starving artist. At the same time that his Jules de Grandin stories were running in Weird Tales, he had a similar series of detective stories publishing in Real Detective Tales. Quinn was writing 2 continuing series at once throughout the 1920s, composing approximately 25,000 words a month on a manual typewriter. Maintaining originality under such a grueling schedule would be difficult for any author. And even though the de Grandin stories follow a recognizable formula, Quinn still managed to produce one striking story after another. It should also be noted that the tendency to recycle plots and ideas for different markets was very similar to the writing practices of Weird Tales' other prolific and popular writer, Robert E. Howard, who is often excused for these habits rather than criticized for them. Throughout his many adventures, the distinctive French detective changed little. His penchant for amusingly French exclamations was a constant throughout all 93 works, as was his taste for cigars and brandy after, and sometimes before, a hard day's work, and his crime-solving styles and methods remained remarkably consistent. From time to time, some new skill or bit of knowledge was revealed to the reader, but in most other respects the Jules de Grandin of The Horror on the Links was the same as the hero of the last story in the series, published 25 years later. He was a perfect example of the rare French blonde type, rather under medium height, but with a military erectness of carriage that made him look several inches taller than he really was. His light blue eyes were small and exceedingly deep-set, and would have been humorous had it not been for the curiously cold directness of their gaze. With his wide mouth, light mustache waxed at the ends in 2 perfectly horizontal points, and those twinkling, stock-taking eyes, he reminded me of an alert tomcat. Thus is de Grandin described by Dr. Trowbridge in the duo's first meeting in 1925. His personal history is dribbled throughout the stories. De Grandin was born and raised in France, attended medical school, became a prominent surgeon, and in the Great War served first as a medical officer, then as a member of the intelligence service. After the war, he traveled the world in the service of French intelligence. His age is never given, but it's generally assumed that the occult detective is in his early 40s. Samuel Trowbridge, on the other hand, is a typical conservative small-town doctor of the first half of the 20th century. As described by Quinn, he is a cross between an honest brother of George Bernard Shaw and former Chief Justice of the United States, Charles Evans Hughes. Bald and bewhiskered, most, if not all, of his life was spent in the same town. Trowbridge is old-fashioned and somewhat conservative, a member of the Knights Templar, a vestryman in the Episcopal Church, and a staunch Republican. While the 2 men are dissimilar in many ways, they are also very much alike. Both are fine doctors and surgeons. Trowbridge might complain from time to time about de Grandin's wild adventures, but he always goes along with them. There is no thought ever of leaving de Grandin to fight his battles alone. More than any other trait, though, they are two men with one mission, and perhaps for that reason they remained friends for all of their 93 adventures and countless trials. The majority of Quinn's de Grandin stories take place in or near Harrisonville, New Jersey, a fictional community that rivals, with its fiends, hauntings, ghouls, werewolves, vampires, voodoo, witchcraft, and zombies, Lovecraft's own Arkham, Massachusetts. For more recent examples of a supernatural-infested community, one need look no further than the modern version of pulp fiction narratives, television. Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Sunnydale, California, and The Night Stranglers, Seattle, both reflect the structural needs of this type of supernatural narrative. Early in the series, de Grandin is presented as Trowbridge's temporary house guest, having traveled to the United States to study both medicine and modern police techniques. But Quinn quickly realized that the series was due for a long run, and recognized that too much globe-trotting would make the stories unwieldy. A familiar setting would be needed to keep the main focus of each tale on the events themselves. Harrisonville, a medium-sized town outside New York City, was completely imaginary, but served that purpose. Most of the de Grandin stories feature beautiful girls in peril. Quinn discovered early on that Farnsworth Wright, Weird Tales' editor from 1924 to 1940, believed nude women on the cover sold more copies. So when writing, he was careful to always feature a scene that could translate to appropriately salacious artwork. Quinn also realized that his readers wanted adventures with love and romance as central themes, so even his most frightening tales were given happy endings, of a sort. And yet the de Grandin adventures are set apart from the stories they were published alongside by their often explicit and bloody content. Quinn predated the work of Clive Barker and the splatterpunk writers by approximately 50 years, but using his medical background, he wrote some truly terrifying horror stories. Tales like The House of Horror and The House Where Time Stood Still feature some of the most hideous descriptions of mutilated humans ever set down on paper. The victims of The Mad Doctor in The House of Horror, in particular, must rank near the top of the list of medical monstrosities in fiction. Another element that set Quinn's occult detective apart from others was his pioneering use of modern science in the fight against ancient superstitions. De Grandin fought vampires, werewolves, and even mummies in his many adventures, but oftentimes relied on the latest technology to save the day. The Frenchman put it best in a conversation with Dr. Trowbridge at the end of The Blood Flower. And wasn't there some old legend to the effect that a werewolf could only be killed with a silver bullet? Ah, bah, he replied with a laugh. What did those old legend-mongers know of the power of modern firearms? When I did shoot that wolf-man, my friend, I had something more powerful than superstition in my hand, morbleu, but I did shoot a hole in him large enough for him to have walked through. Quinn didn't completely abandon the use of holy water, ancient relics, and magical charms to defeat supernatural entities, but he made it clear that de Grandin understood that there was a place for modern technology as well as old folklore when it came to fighting monsters. Nor was de Grandin himself above using violence to fight his enemies. Oftentimes the French occult investigator served as judge, jury, and executioner when dealing with madmen, deranged doctors, and evil masterminds. There was little mercy in his stories for those who used dark forces. While sex was heavily insinuated but rarely covered explicitly in the pulps, except in the most general of terms, Quinn again was willing to go where few other writers would dare. Sexual slavery, lesbianism, and even incest played roles in his writing over the years, challenging the moral values of the day. In the end, there's no denying that the de Grandin stories are pulp fiction. Many characters are little more than assorted clichés bundled together. De Grandin is a model hero, a French expert on the occult, and never at a loss when battling the most evil of monsters. Dr. Trowbridge remains the steadfast companion, much in the Dr. Watson tradition, always doubting but inevitably following his friend's advice. Quinn wrote for the masses, and he didn't spend pages describing landscapes when there was always more action unfolding. The Jules de Grandin stories were written as serial entertainment, with the legitimate expectation that they would not be read back to back. While all of the adventures are good fun, the best way to properly enjoy them is over an extended period of time. Plowing through one story after another will lessen their impact and greatly cut down on the excitement and fun of reading them. One story a week, which would stretch out this entire 5-volume series over 2 years, might be the perfect amount of time needed to fully enjoy these tales of the occult and the macabre. They might not be great literature, but they don't pretend to be. They're pulp adventures, and even after 75 years, the stories read well. Additionally, though the specific aesthetic values of weird tales readers were vastly different than those of today's readers, one can see clearly the continuing allure of these types of supernatural adventures, and the long shadow that they cast over 20th and early 21st century popular culture. Sure, these stories are formulaic, but it is a recipe that continues to be popular to this day. The formula of the occult detective, the protector who stands between us and the monsters of the night, can be seen time and time again in the urban fantasy and paranormal romance categories of commercial fiction, and is prevalent in today's television and movies. Given the ubiquity and contemporary popularity of this type of narrative, it's actually not at all surprising that Seabury Quinn was the most popular contributor to weird tales. We are proud to present the first of 5 volumes reprinting every Jules de Grandin story written by Seabury Quinn. Organized chronologically, as they originally appeared in Weird Tales magazine, this is the first time that the collected de Grandin stories have been made available in trade editions. Each volume has been graced by tremendous artwork from renowned artist Donato Giancola, who has given Quinn's legendary character an irresistible combination of grace, cunning, and timelessness. We couldn't have asked for a better way to introduce the occult Hercule Poirot to a new generation of readers. Finally, if Seabury Quinn is watching from above and closely scrutinizing the shelves of bookstores, he would undoubtedly be pleased as punch and proud as all get out to find his creation, Dr. Jules de Grandin, rising once again in the minds of readers around the world, battling the forces of darkness, wherever, whoever, or whatever the nature of their evil might be. When the jaws of darkness open, only Jules de Grandin stands in Satan's way. Robert E. Weinberg, Chicago, Illinois, USA, and George A. Vanderburg, Lake Eugenia, Ontario, Canada, September 23, 2016. The Horror on the Links. It must have been past midnight when the skirling of my bedside telephone awakened me, for I could see the moon well down toward the horizon as I looked through the window while reaching for the instrument. "Dr. Trowbridge!" an excited voice bored through the receiver. "This is Mrs. Maitland. Can you come over right away? Something dreadful has happened to Paul." I answered, half asleep. "What's wrong?" We don't know," she replied jerkily. "He's unconscious. You know, he'd been to the dance at the country club with Gladys Phillips, and we'd been in bed for hours when we heard someone banging on the door. Mr. Maitland went down, and when he opened the door, Paul fell into the hall. Oh, doctor, he's been hurt dreadfully. Won't you please come right over?" Physician's sleep is like a park, public property. With a sigh, I climbed out of bed and into my clothes, teased my superannuated motor to life, and set out for the Maitland house. Young Maitland lay on his bed, eyes closed, teeth clenched, his face set in an expression of unutterable dread, even in his unconsciousness. Across his shoulders and on the backs of his arms I found several long incised wounds, as though the flesh had been raked by a sharp, pronged instrument. I sterilized and bandaged the cuts and applied restoratives, wondering what sort of encounter had produced such hurts. "Help! Help! Oh, God, help!" the lad muttered thickly, like a person trying to call out in a nightmare. Oh, it's got me, it's—" His words drowned in a gurgling, inarticulate cry of fear, and he sat bolt upright. staring round with vacant, fear-filmed eyes. "Easy, easy on, young fellow," I soothed. "Lie back now, take it easy. You're all right, you're home in bed." He looked uncomprehendingly at me a moment, then fell to babbling inanely. The ape thing, it's got me. Open the door, for God's sake, open the door!" "Here," I ordered gaffly as I drove my hypodermic into his arm. "None of that. You quiet down." The opiate took effect almost immediately, and I left him with his parents while I returned to catch up the raveled ends of my torn sleep. Headlines shrieked at me from the front page of the paper lying beside my breakfast grapefruit. Superfiend sought in girls slaying. Body of young woman found near Sedgemoor Country Club mystifies police. Criminal pervert blamed for killing. Arrest imminent. Almost entirely denuded of clothing, marred by a score of terrible wounds, her face battered nearly past recognition and her neck broken, the body of pretty Sarah Humphreys, 19, a waitress in the employ of the Sedgemoor Country Club, was found lying in one of the bunkers of the Dubbs golf course this morning by John Burroughs, a greenskeeper. Miss Humphreys, who had been employed at the clubhouse for 3 months, completed her duties shortly before midnight, and according to statements of fellow workers, declared she was going to take a short cut across the links to the Andover Road, where she could get a late bus to the city. Her body, terribly mutilated, was found about 25 yards from the road on the golf course this morning. Between the golf links and the Andover Road is a dense growth of trees, and it is thought the young woman was attacked while walking along the path through the woods to the road. Deputy Coroner Nesbitt, who examined the body, gave his opinion that she had been dead about 5 hours when found. She had not been criminally assaulted. Several suspicious characters have been seen in the neighborhood of the club's grounds recently, and the police are checking up on their movements. An early arrest is expected. "There's 2 gentlemen to see you, sir." Nora McGinnis, my household factotum, interrupted my perusal of the paper. "'Tis Sergeant Costello and a Frenchman, or Italian, or something. They do be wanting to ask you questions about the murder of the poor little Humphreys girl." "Ask me about the murder?" I protested. "Why, the first I knew of it was when I looked at this paper, and I'm not through reading the account of the crime yet." "That's all right, Dr. Trowbridge," Detective Sergeant Costello answered with a laugh as he entered the dining room. "We don't figure on arresting you, but there's some questions we'll be asking if you don't mind. This is Professor de Grandin of the Paris police. He's been doing some work for his department over here, and when this murder broke, he offered the chief his help. We'll be needing it too, I'm thinking. Professor de Grandin, Dr. Trowbridge." He waved an introductory hand from one of us to the other. The professor bowed stiffly from the hips in continental fashion, then extended his hand with a friendly smile. He was a perfect example of the rare French blonde type, rather under medium height, but with a military erectness of carriage that made him seem several inches taller than he actually was. His light blue eyes were small and exceedingly deep-set, and would have been humorous had it not been for the curiously cold directness of their gaze. With his blonde mustache waxed at the ends into perfectly horizontal points, and those twinkling stock-taking eyes, he reminded me of an alert tomcat. Like a cat's, too, was his lithe, noiseless step as he crossed the room to shake hands. "I fear Monsieur Costello gives you the misapprehension, Doctor," he said in a pleasant voice, almost devoid of accent. "It is entirely true I am connected with the Service de Sûreté, but not as a vocation. My principal work is at the University of Paris and Saint-Lazare Hospital. At present I combine the vocation of savant with the avocation of criminologist. You see—" "Why," I interrupted, as I grasped his slim, strong hand, "you're Professor Jules de Grandin, the author of Accelerated Evolution." A quick, infectious grin swept across his mouth, and was reflected in his eyes. "You know me, eh? Good it is that I am among friends. However, at the moment our inquiries lie in quite another field. You have a patient, one Monsieur Paul Maitland, yes? He was set upon last night in the Andover Road, no?" "I have a patient named Paul Maitland," I admitted, "but I don't know where he received his injuries." "Nor do we," he answered with a smile. "But we shall inquire. You will go with us while we question him, no?" "Why, yes," I acquiesced. "I should be looking in on him this morning anyhow." "And now, young monsieur," Professor de Grandin began, when introductions had been completed, "you will please tell us what happened last night to you, yes?" Paul looked uncomfortably from one of us to the other, and swallowed nervously. "I don't like to think of it," he confessed, "much less talk about it. But here's the truth, believe it or not. I took Gladys home from the club about 11 o'clock, for she had developed a headache. After I'd said good night to her, I decided to go home and turn in, and had gotten nearly here when I reached in my pocket for a cigarette. My case was gone, and I remembered laying it on a window ledge just before my last dance. The mater gave me that case last birthday, and I didn't want to lose it, so instead of telephoning the club and asking one of the fellows to slip it in his pocket, like a fool, I decided to drive back for it. You know, at least Dr. Trowbridge and Sergeant Costello do, the Andover Road dips down in a little valley and curves over by the edge of the golf course, between the 8th and 9th holes. I'd just reached that part of the road nearest the links when I heard a woman scream twice. It really wasn't 2 screams, more like 1.5, for her second cry was shut off almost before it started. I had a gun in my pocket, a little .22 automatic. Good thing I did, too, so I yanked it out and drew up at the roadside, leaving my engine running. That was lucky, too, believe me. I ran into the woods, yelling at the top of my voice, and there I saw something dark like a woman's body lying across the path. I started toward it when there was a rustling in the trees overhead, and plop, something dropped right down in front of me. Gentlemen, I don't know what it was, but I know it wasn't human. It wasn't quite as tall as I, but it looked about twice as wide, and its hands hung down, clear to the ground. I yelled, "What the hell goes on here?" and pointed my gun at it. And it didn't answer, just started jumping up and down, bouncing with its feet and hands on the ground at once. I tell you, it gave me the horrors. "Snap out of it," I yelled again, "or I'll blow your head off." Next moment, I was so nervous and excited I didn't know what I was doing. I let fly with my pistol right in the thing's face. That came near being my last shot, too. Believe me or not, that thing, whatever it was, reached out, snatched the gun out of my hand, and broke it. Yes, sir, snapped that pistol in two with its bare hands, as easily as I could break a match. Then it was on me. I felt one of its hands go clear over my shoulder, from breast to back, in a single clutch, and it pulled me toward it. It was hairy, sir. Hairy as an ape. Morbleu, yes. And then, de Grandin prompted eagerly. Then I lunged out with all my might and kicked it on the shins. It released its grip a second, and I beat it, ran as I never had on the quarter-mile track, jumped into my car, and took off down the road with everything wide open. But I got these gashes on my back and arms before I got to the roadster. He made 3 or 4 grabs for me, and every one of them took the flesh away where his nails raked me. By the time I got home, I was almost crazy with fright and pain and loss of blood. I remember kicking at the door and yelling for the folks to open, and then I went out like a light. The boy paused and regarded us seriously. "You think that I'm the biggest liar out of jail, most likely. But I've been telling you the absolute straight truth, sirs." Costello looked skeptical, but de Grandin nodded eagerly, affirmatively. "But certainly you speak the truth, mon vieux," he agreed. "Now tell me, if you can, this poilu, this hairy one, how was he dressed?" Paul wrinkled his brow. "I can't say, surely, for it was dark in the woods, and I was pretty rattled. But I think it was in evening clothes. Yes, I'd swear to it. I saw his white shirt bosom." "Ah?" de Grandin murmured. "A hairy thing, a fellow who leaps up and down like a mad monkey or a jumping jack, and wears the evening clothes. It is to think, mes amis." "I'll say it is," Costello agreed. "It is to think what's—"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?